It's almost as if someone had punched a hole in the wall of the Rijksmuseum to reveal this wonderful Tuscan landscape of everyone's dreams. I'm Duncan Bull, Senior Curator of Paintings at the Rijksmuseum. And every time I walk through these galleries, I'm always pulled up short by this luminous pair of portraits here behind me, where under an azure sky dotted with buildings, we see these two solid, substantial individuals whom we could always feel we could talk to, painted with an astonishing realism, sort of warts and all. But it's not just this realism that is so gripping. There's an extraordinary focus in these portraits on what these people do, who they are. The pair of compasses here in the foreground of the younger man indicate that he's an architect, while the older man has a sheet of music clearly showing that he's a musician. These are in fact among the earliest, if not the very earliest, portraits in the European tradition to characterize people by their professions, what they do rather than who they are. Now we know exactly who these two men are thanks to this book. This is the first art history book ever written, Giorgio Vasari's Lives of the Most Eminent Artists, published in 1568, and on page 55 we find the portrait of the man in black, of course in mirror image because it's a woodcut, but in great detail, heading the chapter on the architect Giuliano da San Gallo. Now, Giuliano da San Gallo was perhaps the most important and most innovative architect in Florence in the early Renaissance. Now, Vasari goes on to tell us that Giuliano and his father had been painted by the painter Piero di Cosimo in a pair of portraits that almost seemed to be alive. Now we can reconstruct quite how this extraordinary diptych of portraits came into being. It would appear that Giuliano da San Gallo, then in the flush of his early career, just become the favourite architect of Lorenzo de' Medici, commissioned the young Piero di Cosimo to paint his portrait, and in doing so they chose the new, most fashionable portrait style. This was a style that had been pioneered in Flanders, and here we're very lucky to have on loan from Antwerp an example of it that Piero di Cosimo and Giuliano might have known, a portrait of an Italian aristocrat living in Bruges, and these portraits were disseminated all over Europe, so Piero di Cosimo and Giuliano da San Gallo would have known them. And they chose to show Giuliano da San Gallo in a very similar sort of landscape. And here it's even more fascinating because the detail in the background here, which you can only really make out with a magnifying glass, shows a man in a red hat sitting at an organ and playing it at an open-air mass in front of this church. Now we know that Francesco, Giuliano's father, was also an architect, but in choosing to portray him so clearly in his second profession, that of a musician, Giuliano and Piero di Cosimo were really concerned to draw attention to the important fundamental similarities of music and architecture. That is, that they are both about harmony and proportion. Now come to the Rijksmuseum, and when you come, don't forget to see these two portraits. They are about so much more than just the harmonious relations between a father and a son. They stand at the beginning of mankind's new confidence in himself that we see going through scientific work today.